There's dozens of different ways you can turn food into a career. Food is such a way to tell the story. I was running a magazine. We would travel all over the country, hosting events, and at the same time, scouting restaurants. In some ways, it's not that different than when I graduated from college and did not see traditional media as an option for myself. It's the fact that there are so many opportunities. So what I would say is do the work, realize that there's a lot that's out there. It does not look like what you thought it would, maybe what you wish it did, but it's still there. You have to try because you can't sit at home and say, I have all these great thoughts and all of these great ideas, and why isn't anyone taking me up on them if you're not showing them what you're doing?
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. I'm so lucky to be joined by another one of my icons in food media today. Her illustrious career from Plate magazine to Food and Wine to her own cookbooks and Substack is so impressive. But her voice and approach have an accessibility that make you feel like she's been your friend forever, just sharing her tips and tricks to live deliciously. From the heyday of print magazines to how to build a career in today's rapidly changing landscape, we're going to cover everything food media for you today. Please welcome writer and editor, Chandra Ram. Chandra!
Sarah, hi. Thank you so much for having me and for that intro, which I'm going to take as a pep talk for the year.
I think you should. I think you should take it every day because it's all just facts. You have such an incredible career so far. I'm so excited for what you're doing next. And I'm excited for us to talk about it because I know, like me, I was a classic millennial woman. I was like, I'm going to be a big shot editor of a lifestyle magazine one day. And they all started to crumble.
Yeah, I know. Don't you want to go back to, the 25, 30-year-old versions of ourselves and just kind of give them a little hug and be like, all right, everything's going to change.
I do. I especially want to hug my 25-year-old self. You're right. And be like, girl, a lot's coming and there's a lot you cannot control. But we get to roll with the punches and just learn even more.
Yeah. And, things go in a direction that's totally different than what you expected, but that can also be a really good thing.
I think it is. I think ultimately we all get our own through lines that we can look back on and see that, that worked out well. Well, I'd love for you to think about even younger than 25-year-old Chandra here. So I want to take things back to childhood. What was food like for you growing up? Cooking in your household? When did you think you really first fell in love with food?
I mean, it was pretty much from the get-go. I grew up with a mother who was very, not just ambitious in the kitchen, but very eager to learn about other cuisines and to try something that might feel a little too ambitious, but just to go for it anyways. I should back up by saying, my parents immigrated to the US 2.5 years before I was born. 3 years.
Okay.
So my mother is Irish and my father was Indian from South India, a town called Vizag or fully Vishakhapatnam on the southeastern coast. And they met when they were in London. They got fixed up at a friend's party, fell in love, got married. My oldest brother was born in London. And then my parents moved to the US before my other older brother was born. My mother grew up in rural Ireland in a very small town. And she told me once that she remembered sitting in school and seeing a poster on the wall in the classroom. And it was of India. And it had a picture of the Taj Mahal and all that kind of usual iconic images of India. And she just thought I want to go there. I want to do this. And for someone living in this very small town in Ireland, I think that that's so fantastic and obviously very prescient. And it kind of speaks to who she is as a mother, as a person, and to take it back to food, the way she cooked. So she didn't necessarily know how to cook. After my parents got married, my father started to teach her how to cook, and in particular, how to cook Indian food. And hilariously, my tiny red-haired, white-skinned, blue-eyed mother, has one of the spiciest palates of anyone I've ever known.
You're
And
kidding.
I'm not like, I've seen her take a Thai bird chili and just take a bite out of it, which
Oh,
she
Lord.
wouldn't do now. She wouldn't do now. She's 80. She's like, no, not going to do that. But it's interesting because I did not like Indian food when I was growing up because it was so spicy. And I grew up in Kentucky, in Lexington, and we ate Indian food, I would say like at least once a week, often once or twice. And so often it was so spicy that I just didn't really enjoy it.
Right.
And
She didn't realize that no one else could actually eat the food.
right, I do remember one time my father just kind of like put the fork down and said, okay, this is too much. This is like too spicy. And that was like the one time my brothers and I were like allowed to go make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and just sort of like soothe our palates and our tongues. But otherwise, yeah, it's funny. I remember when I was like in first grade talking with one of my best friends who lived next door, and she was having like Campbell's soup and a sandwich for dinner. And I was like, that sounds really nice and so American. And I'm having like some fancy thing from like the Time Life cookbooks, or, some issue of Gourmet, and some like totally elaborate meal. But now, as we go through life and we're all we're all talking so much about balance, and we're talking about how to make dinner easier, I am just in awe that my mother ran this household and was doing a full-on meal for 4 children and her husband and herself every single night.
And like from Gourmet, you said, and from
these Time Life cookbooks, like
really nice recipes. Your mom's own global view, even though she came from a rural area, really allowed you to be excited about food from anywhere.
I love the fact that she was just kind of game for everything. It's interesting to me to think about how they, as immigrants, came to the US, and part of exploring that food culture was, those convenience foods that were so big, and for better or worse, really have formed a lot of childhood memories for people like us.
Definitely. So I want to talk about the next step in your journey here. So you ended up going to, of course, the CIA, Culinary Institute of America. Did you imagine yourself becoming a chef? What inspired you to want to go to cooking school?
No, I didn't imagine myself as a chef. I started working in restaurants when I was 16, and I loved working in restaurants. Like, I love the energy of it. 3 hours could go by, and then because it was just so busy, my first job was at a Chi-Chi's restaurant. So obviously incredibly glamorous.
Yes.
But it was like totally busy. Every weekend night, we would have an hour, 2 hour wait, people sitting in the waiting area, people in the bar, people who'd driven in from small towns an hour or 2 hours away, dressed up in some cases, like they're coming into the city, they're going to this restaurant. And it was really fun. It was a total party. And, I knew I loved food and cooking because as soon as I was really able to cook and enjoy my mom in the kitchen, we were cooking together. And I loved that side of it. And I would tell you, my mother would throw these dinner parties. I remember she bought a wok. And I swear to you, she had a Japanese dinner party that weekend, and no one owned a wok.
Plus, you're in Kentucky. Like, this is a whole other level.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a college town, and so there was more of an international community there than in other places, but it still in no way resembles the food culture that we enjoy so much today. And so I was, working in restaurants, and then I stayed working in restaurants for years, all through college. And that's when I started to really get this bug about cooking professionally. And because I just loved doing these overly ambitious dinner parties, like cooking out of like the Silver Palette cookbooks, which were like such a fun introduction and such a fantastic gateway into that sort of like dinner party life. Right. And when I was finishing up in undergrad, and I was studying journalism and working on the university's newspaper and doing all of those things. I was like, okay, I want to write about food, but I also really wanted to get into catering. And Martha
Mm.
Stewart was like my North Star.
Yep.
Absolutely. Which I think is such a testament to her that she has been the North Star for young people getting into food for decades.
Well,
Like,
they just re-released her book.
I know I
Seeing it
had it
everywhere.
and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so over the top and kind of crazy, but I wanted to do it.
Yes.
So I went to culinary school and I had cooked in restaurants. I had always previously worked front of the house and had done a little bit of catering. And then at the time, you needed at least 6 months restaurant experience to get into
Mm.
the CIA.
Wow.
So I talked my way into a job as the omelet cook at an Embassy Suites hotel in South Portland,
Yes.
Maine. I started doing all of that, but I was really drawn to catering. And so when I was in culinary school, I worked for a caterer in the area. And she, one of the few outside caterers approved to do events at West Point because
Oh,
the CIA is in Hudson Valley and
right.
it's not very far from West Point at all. And so we would do weddings, all kinds of events for if like an ambassador was coming to visit West Point, we would work that. But I really got to see this sort of down and dirty life of catering because like I remember once we did a wedding and it was on the side of a mountain, you
Oh
know,
my God.
the way you do,
Casual. Yeah.
casual and very generous budget. So we had one van with portable gas stoves and portable refrigeration and all of that because we were throwing this massive, like 5 course meal on the side of a mountain
In the wilderness.
in the wilderness, but like fancy wilderness, fancy 5 course meal wilderness. And then we're packing up all the food, putting it back in the van, hoping none of the leftovers don't spill all over the van
On the way back down.
on the way back down. And then loading everything back into the catering shop and seeing like what's salvageable and all of that. But also just really seeing that business model that she had a prepared food store, kind of like specialty foods and prepared foods. And she would just kind of look at, all right, here's what's going on event wise. How can I double up on my prep and serve some of the same things in the prepared food shop? What's my staffing going to be? All of that. So it was that more than anything was just such a massive crash course in things. And then all the while going to CIA and doing all of the classes, you know, on butchery and fish and seafood preparation and wines and all of that. So
Oh my God.
it was kind of awesome.
It sounds amazing.
It was
Busy time for sure.
very big.
And it's almost like you were taking that love that your mom instilled in you of throwing these grand dinner parties and said, great, I can do this at a scale at it in a business when it comes to catering and be part of
Yeah.
someone's best dinner parties, essentially.
Yeah, it's funny because that was sort of the through line for me through college and the writing I was doing. And, you know, I remember really thinking about this when I was taking sociology classes as well, that food was so much of our culture and it was how we shared our culture. And I've gotten to write about like how my family cooked and the garden my parents had. And later in life, like think back on the fact that like my father grew okra and
Incredible.
in our backyard in Kentucky, which a lot of our neighbors did. And I think they were like, oh, this is nice. You're embracing their like Southern vegetables and our traditions. And my father grew up eating okra in India. And of course, you know, we now better understand that okra was really transported from Africa around the world and because of colonialism and so many things. But, you know, that you can have these food cultures that maybe don't mirror each other, but certainly have some commonality.
Yes. I always love that it's the one single language we can all speak to each other.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you think about so many different types of cultures, and welcoming someone is usually having the biggest spread of food you can think of and trying to force people to eat a lot.
Right.
And I love that.
True. That's true in a wedding in upstate New
Yes.
York. That's true in Kentucky and throughout the South. That's true anytime you're in an Indian's home.
Yes.
And that's true for you and I in our homes in the
Oh, yeah.
Midwest. So
I always have too much. Like whenever I'm hosting, I always go a
much.
little too overboard because I'm like, I can't have too little.
Right. Right.
God forbid someone doesn't get enough of this one thing.
You can't.
And
Unacceptable.
like when we hosted Christmas the other year, and I got a big old thing of cheddar in the shape of Ohio because I'm like, well, we live here now. So
You know what? I respect that. I
thank you.
respect that. There should
Thank you.
be more
There should be more
cheese,
cheese. There should
cheese
be
in
more.
fun shapes. Yes.
Yes. I know. I was like, Illinois would be a great one. Or even someone should do like the Chicago Star from the flags. Like maybe
Or,
you and
you know,
I need to just start a shaped cheese business.
yeah, in.
Oh, this could go far. Well, I want to hear a little bit more. So you're getting your feet wet in all ways possible in terms of understanding the culinary scene, what it's really like to be behind the scenes, working that hard physically. You clearly have always loved storytelling too, and the fact that you went into journalism. So as you're coming out of that world, or I should say the end of your time at CIA, what then inspired you to say, okay, it's time to start figuring out how to work for some of the best magazines in the food media space?
Well, I did not think that was possible, to be perfectly honest, because when I had studied journalism, so much of the emphasis had been on newspapers. And in that world, you get a job at a paper and you got a job, and ideally you got to pick what section you were in. But it was all about starting in a smaller market and then moving up to a mid-sized market and then moving up into a major market. And you would just find yourself working for a particular section. And so I didn't really see a direct path forward because in undergrad, I was learning how to get ahead if I wanted to work in a daily newspaper or in broadcast television.
I was going to say television. It's like, okay, choose one of your lanes, print or TV, and then
Right.
just go towards it.
Right. It was very separate, the opposite of what it is today. But it was also that you're going to follow this model of getting ahead. And then when I was in culinary school, there wasn't much at all discussion of anything outside of working in the kitchen as a chef. We kind of touched on like corporate food service, college universities, or country clubs, or hospitals and things like that. But there wasn't any discussion on how to get into food media. And I think that's because when I was coming up, the notion that someone would have worked as a cook, trained in culinary school, and then gone into media was still very, very new. And so it wasn't anything they were going to shape a curricula around. And so I finished culinary school and I had worked in restaurants, I cooked in restaurants. I knew that wasn't 100% for me. It didn't quite fit. I had done all this work in catering and was a little tired of catering.
A little burnt out. Yeah.
It will do that to you. And so I thought, okay, what else can I do? And I actually don't know how I heard about consulting work, but I heard about a company that did consulting for food service for manufacturers and how to get their products in restaurants or to develop recipes. And so got a job there and we worked, like, for example, Tabasco was a client.
Oh.
And so Tabasco would say, hey, we need a dozen recipes featuring the green jalapeno Tabasco, and we really want to focus on seafood appetizers. And so we would go into our kitchens and develop all of these recipes. Or I worked with like California raisins. And then it was like, okay, this is how you can sell these things. This is what you can do here. And so I was working in that area for a while, and it was 5-6 day a week travel, consulting, running around. It was a lot. And then I was starting to feel like, okay, this isn't feeling right. I was thinking back to when I was in culinary school, when I did my externship, I came to Chicago because I had lived here for undergrad and I knew I wanted to get back to Chicago. And through a hilarious 6 degrees of separation, I knew that there was a chef named Paul Kahn who was opening his first restaurant
Oh my
called Blackbird. And I was able to talk my way into getting him on the phone and talked him into joining CIA's externship program so that I could come and work at Blackbird. And I worked at Blackbird right when it was like, I remember when the first reviews came out, when like celebrities started to come in. Every chef in the area was coming in to find out what was happening here at this restaurant that was getting so much attention. And along the way, I kind of wrote down the name of the PR firm that was working with them, because the publicist would come in and say like, okay, like I need these 3 plates because we're doing a TV shoot over here. We're doing all of these things. And I had studied public relations as part of my communication degree at Loyola. And so I thought, okay, that is potentially an angle. That's like an
Yes.
avenue. And so when I was looking to try something new, and isn't this one of the most amazing things about working in food is that there's like 100 different directions you can
Yes.
go. Cold called, and I've gotten so many jobs just from cold calling. But I cold called the PR firm that had worked with Blackbird a few years before. And it happened to be a day that they had said, we need to hire somebody else in our restaurant division.
Oh my gosh.
And so I shined up my resume and sent it in, and I interviewed with them, and I started working in restaurant PR, which was a great fit because I would meet with the chefs who owned restaurants we worked with, and I was able to talk to them on their level a bit. And I like understood that I couldn't call them after 4 p.m. And I understood that if I said, hey, can we do this? That I was asking like what I was asking of the kitchen. And also like, hi, there's like this great culinary tradition that we could turn into a bit of an event or a media angle for the restaurant. So I worked in PR for several years, just very much focused on restaurants and then consumer packaged goods a bit, and overarching like hospitality, hotels, and things like that.
The dream.
And
Honestly, it's such a
I,
dream job to be on either side when it comes
yeah,
to journalism or PR, is just to be able to get the behind the scenes. And I love that you had that sense of relatability with everyone. It wasn't just, hi, I'm your rep. Like, we need this right now.
I was sort of like, okay, I can call this person and be like, I know this is crazy, but this just came up. And can I get you to a TV studio tomorrow morning at 6? And we're going to talk about this thing. And I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be good. And there were so many great moments of just being able to see that, hey, we did this work and now this restaurant is packed.
Right.
And not just on weekends, but like on a Tuesday night. And hey, this is what we can do to really help boost their lunch business. And also to help that chef, the owners, tell their story, because they didn't get into the restaurants because, I mean, I hope they didn't get into restaurants because they were like, let's just print money, because that's not going to happen. But they got into restaurants because they wanted to tell a story through their food and through their service. And so this was part of it. And I really loved that aspect of it. And after a few years, I started to get a couple of opportunities. I was talking with people and saying, I would love to get into writing. But also at that time, it felt like there was such a wall between PR and media that you couldn't cross over from one to the other, which is ridiculous because there's so many people I know who worked in PR and then went into media. And it really gives such a great understanding of both industries and how to work well.
Yes.
And around that time, Plate magazine was starting up. And they had launched a first issue as a little bit of a test balloon and with advertisers and to kind of get the production together. It launched as a quarterly.
Mhm.
Nancy Ross Ryan was the first editor. And this is how you can make accidents work out. She called me one day and she had the wrong information about me. She said, someone told me that you have all this expertise in Vietnamese fish sauce.
Oh, and you're like, I can.
Like, I can if we schedule this in a couple of days. Sure, I'd be happy. I'd love to do this. Absolutely. Let's talk in a couple of days. And then meanwhile, I spent the next 48 hours like doing this absolute crash course in the different types of fish sauce, how a Vietnamese fish sauce will differ from a Thai fish sauce, the fact that it's not just limited to Southeast Asia, that there's garum, which has, a centuries old culinary tradition in Rome in particular. And so I learned everything I could about fish sauce. 2 days later, had this phone interview with her and said the one sentence that she needed for her article. And then she said, well, I know you have a culinary background and we could really use a recipe to go with this. Do you have something or would you be open to developing a recipe? And I was like, absolutely, 100%. I'm in. I'm really excited about this because it was also a food magazine based in Chicago. And at that time, media felt very, very centered on New York. Bon Appetit had been based in California for a long time, but they had moved all operations to New York. And I was like, okay, this is something I can do without having to move to New York and really get involved from the ground up. And so I had my quote and my recipe in the third issue of Plate magazine and kind of stayed in touch. And after another issue or two, they said, hey, like, we really like working with you and you all have all these ideas. We could use someone who can write and develop recipes and who knows the food scene and culinary world and all of this. And so I became a regular contributor to each issue of the magazine, which was growing. It soon moved into 6 times a year frequency. And I basically wrote the middle section of the magazine. And each issue had a particular theme. It started out with themes like based around different proteins of like, oh, this is going to be all pork and this is going to be seafood. And then it would get into exploring different cuisines. There was an issue that was all about different sauces.
I would have loved that.
It was fun. I mean, who among us doesn't love just sort of making all these different sauces and talking with chefs about that traditional saucier position in like a European kitchen following the French Brigade system, but then also like how any cook would start to move into making pan sauces and how sauces had evolved from, when I was at CIA, we learned the mother sauces. And then I went into kitchens and like no one was making velouté, right? As a brunch cook, I made more hollandaise than I particularly remember, but I still stand a really fantastic eggs Benedict. I'm just always very grateful for the poor cook who had to make it. But yeah, so we would write about sauces and I would write about like, this is how to fix a broken hollandaise, like very team focused work.
Yes.
And then a few years after that, Nancy wanted to get away from like the day-to-day of putting out the magazine. She had always been involved in writing cookbooks and she really just wanted to focus more on doing books. And the editorial director and publisher, Bill McDowell and Steve Mayer, said, hey, we think you should be our next editor. And I was like, hey, I do too.
You're like, I'm ready.
I'm ready. I'm doing this as I had been doing more and more freelance writing while keeping my hand in PR. But I was at that make or break point where it's like, you can't do more writing if you're also pitching the same outlets.
Right.
But I needed writing to become a bigger financial portion of my life because I had a mortgage to pay. I had bills to pay.
Yeah. And we know that journalism, you also don't go into it for the big bucks.
No. Or if you are, we need to talk. But
yes, as well as entrepreneurship. I'm like, restaurants, entrepreneurship, journalism. Like, you do not need to go into these to make money. It is nice if you do.
Right. And there should be a way to make money, to make a living at it. And it involves like going back to that fact that like there's dozens of different ways you can turn food into a career. Yeah. But to get a staff job at a food magazine in Chicago was just
so great.
And so, so I stayed at Plate. I was at 15 years total.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. From the time I started freelancing until I left. And it was a lot. I mean, we launched the websites, we launched event series. We would travel all over the country hosting events and at the same time scouting restaurants to find, because we had launched an issue that was all about chefs to watch. And these were the guys who were in another year or two going to get the Food and Wine Best New Chef or Bon Appetit's, Chef of the Year, Restaurant of the Year, Esquire, James Beard Awards and things, but we were trying to find them first. And so I was also running a magazine, and then, as part of that editor-in-chief position, collaborating with my publisher, Steve, on different events we could do and going out with him to visit advertisers, and then being like, okay, I need to, in the next 36 hours, go to 5 restaurants. So we're going to do 2 dinners tonight, and then we're going to get up and go to breakfast. And then we're going to, now I'm like, oh, gosh.
That's a lot of like little bites, because you can't eat a full meal at each of those meals.
And you can't necessarily be like, oh, I love steak tartare. I really want to order the steak tartare, because actually I really need to try the dishes that are the signatures. Or Melissa Clark from the New York Times. It's like, she's a good friend of mine. And we always laugh because when we go out to eat, we always will order the weirdest thing on the menu, because it's like, okay, this is clearly something this chef went out on a limb to put out there, and it's either going to be fantastic or it's going to be the absolute disaster that it kind of reads like. And sometimes it's really great.
I think that's a good lesson, to try to get away from your comfort zone when you're eating out anywhere. Is you could, of course, there's probably the staples. They're like, that is really the best X on this menu. But I like the idea of choosing something you've never had before, or like you said, is just so weird that, is this going to work? Is this going to be amazing or not? Like, it reminds me of, my partner and I went to St. Lucia 5 years ago now. Oh God. And we went to Hotel Chocolat. So every bit of the meal had cacao in it in some form or other. So we're like, okay, what are we expecting here? Is it going to be sweet? Is it going to be like just chocolatey? And we had these white chocolate mashed potatoes. And I tell you, they're some of the best mashed potatoes I've ever had in my life. And it's not this, it was not this overwhelmingly like biting into a grocery store white chocolate bar. They just balanced it so perfectly. So I get what you're saying, where you're like, you never know when you try something crazy that is going to completely change your life and come up in a memory. Just even when someone's talking about something else, you're like, oh yeah, that was so amazing. And I hope they're known for that. I hope that other people go and try it too.
Because then it's like, okay, I have to try this. They've really done their work on it. Yeah. Also, Steve, my former publisher, was a big fan of, I think it was Andre Saltner maybe who had said this, or it could have been Jacques Pepin, that when he goes out to eat, he always orders the chicken, because the chicken is such a test of the chef, of the line cook's talent.
I could see that. Yeah.
And so, so we would do a lot of balance of like, all right, they've got like, a pan roasted chicken. Let's try that. Let's try the white chocolate mashed potatoes. Right. Let's try this thing. And let's just sort of see how all of this adds up, and what is it, because we were really trying to cover the food scene nationally. It was, okay, is this not just the best version of it in Seattle or Columbus or Cincinnati, or like a smaller market, but like, how does this whole stand up to all the meals that we've also had in the last couple of months in New York, in Chicago, in LA, in San Francisco? So brilliant. A lot of eating, a lot of food, a lot of eating.
And probably once you had a good eye, found a lot of picture taking. I mean, even though you were starting off in print, so much of what you described in terms of your role as an editor is really what anyone in any type of role in food media still has to do to date. So what would you say to someone who is starting right now? There's going to be a site most likely connected to it. Maybe it's just someone's Substack that they built their website on, as well as many social accounts here, and different ways that you're reaching people. Maybe it's in-person events, like you said, too, because the best way to experience food is, of course, in person and not just reading about it. So what would you say from your time with Plate, from your time with Food and Wine, and your other endeavors that you've had here, that you would say to someone who is just graduating college and had the exact same feelings as you did?
In some ways, it's not that different than when I graduated from college and did not see traditional media as an option for myself because I wasn't going to move to New York and I didn't want to follow this typical path that I had been taught in journalism classes. But it's the fact that there are so many opportunities. So,
Yes.
what I would say is do the work. You're talking about early days of iPhone food photos. And back when it was like chefs would get so mad at you for doing it. And it was considered a bit rude to do.
Oh,
And it's funny, I'm doing that thing where I'm like trying to clean up my old phone photos, excess
yes.
photos. And I'll come across ones and I'm like, ooh, I was a terrible food photographer in 2012. Or, like if, your Facebook account shows you like, oh, here's a memory from 15 years
Yes.
ago. And you're like, well, that looks really terrible. Thanks.
They're like, this looks like slop, but it
This
was
looks like
also the technology too. I
it was
will
the
say.
technology, it was the lighting. Sometimes I'm like, well, I was dating a real jerk then. So obviously, like
Yeah.
it's all from years ago. So I think that it's getting back to the fact that there are a ton of different opportunities. They don't look like what maybe you wanted or expected.
Yeah.
Print media is still around. I'm loving the publications that are bringing it back as a specialty because when I was at Plate, I would regularly, every single month, I would get emails from readers who were like, someone stole my copy. How can I get another copy? Or I can't find this issue from last year. And I loved this recipe. And I just really want to see they saved every issue. And
Mm.
it was such a massive compliment. And so it felt like a special thing that we were still publishing in print, as I think it does with so much media now. And so now when I look at like Serviette and I look at like Homebound and all of these other publications, I'm like,
Yeah.
print is
Edible.
still edible. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So many Gravy from Southern Foodways Alliance. There's so many great opportunities there. So it's just to say, realize that there's a lot that's out there. It does not look like what you thought it would, or
Right.
maybe what you wish it did, but it's still there. There are still print food magazines like One Up, like Food and Wine, some of the other ones that we've mentioned. There's also all of the opportunities to publish independently. And I think that we're seeing that print and also just big media, it's not revered in the same way it
Right.
was when we were coming up. And so you can go and create a Substack or a newsletter on a different platform, put your content out there and put it out there on social media, even though the algorithm is always changing and people
Yeah.
are looking at social media differently and taking breaks and doing all of that. Like, do the work and get it out there, which is exactly what I was doing decades ago when I finished college, when I finished culinary school, is to just go and do it. And like, you have to try because you can't sit at home and say, I have all these great thoughts and all of these great ideas. And why isn't anyone taking me up on them if you're not showing them what you're doing? And
Absolutely.
so I think there are still opportunities. I think it just looks really different from the way it did when you and I were coming up. And, also someone finishing school right now probably doesn't have those expectations that we did.
Okay.
This is what like the real media job is,
Yes.
or that. Like, I'm so grateful that I had those years at Plate. I was at Food and Wine for about like 3.5, 4 years. That was that was like an education. It was wild to me. The number of times I said to friends, like, I ran a food magazine for well over a decade. And this is totally different because of the markers that we used for success, because of learning how to partner with the e-commerce division, learning how to take an event like the Classic in Aspen and in Charleston and say, like, how do we create really interesting, viable content for someone who's not able to spend the thousands of dollars that they need to
Right.
attend one of these, but how can we bring it home to them in a way that makes it feel relatable? How are our headlines resonating on Google Discover versus Apple News versus what our newsletter audience wants versus what our social audience wants? and, working in a massive media company. It was a great way to see all the different angles and all the different sides and realize that, going back to what we keep saying, like, there are so many different ways to
Yes.
find your way. And I've been doing this for decades, and now I'm working for myself again. I've done this before a couple of times in my career, and it's different every time.
I was going to ask, how does it feel different this time around? Because I love that as I was listening to you describe journalism, I think it made me realize why becoming a founder felt so fun and almost easy for me. Because I was like, well, yes, if we clicked down, loved writing most of all at that time in my life, was not on the photography side of things, was not a videographer, was not into social media yet. But especially like in journalism school, getting my master's, you had to learn about every single aspect. And I think the best founders and entrepreneurs, they know every little department and everything that's happening within whatever they're working on, or else you're not going to be able to really grow it. And then you get the right people who can double click down into those areas.
Right.
So as a solopreneur yourself, what feels different this time around? And what are you focusing on the most?
Well, along the way in my career, I started working on cookbooks. And so I've co-authored 3 cookbooks. I've contributed to kind of like other compilation books. I've written a book by myself. And I think as traditional media got faster and faster and faster, and with so many sort of like, okay, breaking changes of, Google just shifted the algorithm and they're doing this, and we need to respond to that immediately and drop everything and do this. I realized, like, I really wanted to get back to cookbooks. And so that's something I'm doing a lot of now. I'm writing a book with Stephanie Izard. She's got a book coming out in 2027.
Okay.
It already
we're
sounds
ready.
weird to say 2027, but I'm like, is that miles away? No, that's actually
It's
less
next
than a year away.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she and I are working on her book.
Love that.
And that's something that I love doing because I've known Steph for years. I've known her since before she was on Top Chef, and we've been friends for a long time. So it's really fun to be able to partner together and then also to work on this really fun book. I've launched my Substack, so I'm doing that. And, writing, creating an edit calendar, really checking the metrics to see what days are resonating with people. All of these things that I wouldn't have understood if I hadn't worked in traditional media to see what days were best for which types of newsletters. Like at Plate, we always put out our recipe newsletter on a Tuesday because we knew that many traditional restaurants were closed Sunday, Monday. And Tuesday was a great day for a chef to start kind of thinking, okay, what am I doing for the rest of the week? How is our menu changing? Oh, we've got these recipes in. I'm learning that I feel like weekends are really good for my Substack. I've been trying different days and looking at like, okay, like Sunday is feeling like what's turning out to be a good day for my audience. And so it's realizing that you have to look at all those different aspects of it. I have overseen 9 million photo shoots as a cookbook author, as a magazine editor. And so now a lot of times I'm the person who's doing it, and I'm nitpicking about my own photography and then also saying, okay, this is on my Substack. This is on my social media. It's okay if it's not perfect.
Right.
And in fact, I think people are responding to work that feels a little bit more relatable and is obviously coming from my kitchen and the room in my apartment that has east and south light coming in. And so it winds up being a good spot for me to set up a backdrop and take a photo of something. But I guess it comes back to, if this is something that we're pursuing as careers, but also with a great deal of passion,
Right.
then lean into the fact, like, enjoy it. And
Absolutely.
and I think it's challenging. I don't want to feel embarrassed by my food photography. And I have to remember, I've been running photo shoots for years. And so I do have an eye. I do understand what's working, what isn't. I don't necessarily understand as well as a professional photographer by any stretch of the imagination. But there's a lot that I do get about styling and plating and things like that. And I can learn about the rest. Learning
Absolutely.
video is difficult, and it also requires putting yourself out there in a way that I haven't necessarily thought about doing, wanted to do, but that's the challenge. So the whole world is changing every single day, and food media and the food world is changing every single day. And, my husband works in software. His industry is
Oh
changing
gosh.
all the time. Sometimes, like if I'm driving down the street and I stop and I'm like, oh, that's a dry cleaners. There's still dry cleaners in business because people used to go to offices every day and they used to wear dress clothes or even suits every day. So just understanding that everything is changing. So you can't just wish the change away. So you've got to just be part of it.
Yeah, we have to grow and adapt with it, just no matter what, or else evolution.
Right.
I have a couple last questions for you. I could talk to you for hours,
I mean,
honestly.
you sent over so many fantastic questions, and I feel like I've taken us on 9,000 tangents. So bring 'em.
Okay. I like how that's always just like a light outline for us. And then we just see where the journey happens. So, what I'm focusing on this year is the fact that, doing this is because I love helping other people get their stories out there. I've always loved storytelling. So, as you're promoting your Substack, this book with stuff, any other projects that you're doing, because as we know too, if you want to be on the creator side of things, if you want to be in media, you have to have multiple streams of revenue these days.
Mhm.
What are you really doing from a positioning standpoint when you are promoting your work? What do you think is your storytelling secret ingredient that you like to lean into?
Wow, that's a great question. It goes back to where you took us earlier in the interview about getting into food, and because food is such a way to tell the story,
Yes.
and working with chefs and restaurant owners in PR to help them tell the story. And then as I've worked with chefs like Jean Joho, like Bill Kim, Stephanie Izard, to help them tell their story, I love doing it in a way that really gets the story out there and that helps them feel like they did it, and
Mm,
take the words that they might send and, clean it up and really drive home the point, or suggest some different phrasing, or just chat with them and then pull it together and have them say like, oh, wow, I feel like this sounds very much like who I am. And, they feel like their story is being told. And so one of the things that has remained fairly constant in publishing, one of the few constants, is that people love cookbooks.
yes.
And so I think we are saying, like, in terms of my positioning and what I'm doing, I'm leaning in on cookbooks a lot because when so many people switched over to Kindle versions of other books, they still bought print cookbooks
Oh, yeah.
because you want that experience. You want the book open.
Beautiful. They're so beautiful.
They're beautiful, they're tactile, they're all those things that, food is a multi-sensory tactile experience. And so I think it's important that cookbooks are as well. So leaning in with cookbooks, doing that a lot. In my Substack, I'm really focused on repurposing leftovers,
Yes.
a different recipe with each issue. And that's been a lot of fun because that's been like my secret skill in
Yeah.
some ways, of just opening a refrigerator that's full of a half a cup of 5 different things and saying, okay, actually, this is the thing that we can make with this.
Right.
And sometimes it's really great to throw everything into a frittata or a pasta, or turn it in, like, just about everything can be made into nachos, right? Or tacos or something. Like, you can,
I love that.
if you don't want to be super hardcore and
Yes.
traditional about it, you can do that. But how do you make it into something that might feel a little bit different? And how do you respect the ingredients so that they present well on the second or third or, fourth iteration? So one of the things that I did was based on an article I wrote for Chicago Magazine about the experience of going out to a steakhouse and having all of these leftovers. Because you go to a steakhouse, it's really expensive.
Oh, when you take home your bavettes, one of
Yes,
the best in Chicago, you're not throwing out like 2 bites worth.
exactly.
You
And
are
I am
taking it home.
100% that person who is like, Oh no, I
Keep
understand.
doing.
We ate all of the shrimp. I'm going to take the sauce home because there's a ton of it and I feel like I can do something with it. And it might wind up being part of like a flatbread or something, but
Right.
I hate food waste.
Same.
And I love the challenge of coming up with a different way to do this. And so when I was playing around with leftover steaks, I was like, okay, this is a protein that is expensive. It's tough on the planet. We want to respect all of that and use up every bit of it. And we want to do it well. And so I've been playing around with like different ways to reheat it
Mm,
while without disturbing the integrity of the
yeah.
meat and
Making it
turning it
so
into
tough.
something dry and chewy and things like
Yeah.
that. So, which feels right. It feels very much in line with the ethos I grew up with, from parents who had come from cultures that were more focused on using up every bit of
Right.
everything you could. It also feels very right for the moment we're in right now, where we are being incredibly thoughtful about each purchase at the grocery store. And we're thoughtful about our restaurant experiences and wanting to show respect for the food that we eat and the farmers who raise these animals and grow these vegetables and grains. And also just wanting to be creative and realize that we can take influences from all over the world and enjoy them in our kitchens.
I can't wait to see this turned into a cookbook.
Me too. So let's like put that out into the world.
Yes, as part of your manifestations is
Okay.
you're working on the cookbook with Steph. Yes, that's great. But I could see you taking almost just everything you put on Substack and be like, great, let's put it into cookbook format. Let's do some gorgeous shoots with this and get it on people's kitchen countertops.
I would love that. I would love that. So that's something that is a goal. I still have to, still doing all the things like balancing, the flip side of there being so many different ways you can work in food and food media and writing and recipe development is that it sometimes means you're doing 10 different projects.
Yeah.
I'm very focused on the book with Steph. I'm working with another chef just kind of quietly to help them like clean up their cookbook and like their manuscript and their recipes and that sort of thing. And I'm talking with someone else about doing cooking demos. And I also work a lot with organizations to do food trend talks and all of that. And so it's like my job is not just one thing, it's like 12 things, 15 things.
Many things, many hats,
But
cute hats. But
yeah.
yes,
So yeah, I hope the hats are cute. I should make sure the hats are cute.
there's a beret in there somewhere.
Somewhere. Brain.
I think I know what your storytelling secret ingredient is. If we were to put a topic on it, it's chameleon. Because not only do you have your own voice, which we see on your Substack, but because you work with so many other folks and they come back to you and say, oh, that was so great. Like it was me talking. It wasn't just, oh, Chandra wrote it and it was from her voice on that person's behalf. So I think there's something really special in that you're able to really absorb what that person wants and needs and then be able to be a chameleon to put it out into the world.
Thank you. I hope so. I mean, when I was working on staff at magazines, one of the best compliments I would get from writers is if I edit their article and send it back to them and let them see what changes were in there. I think when they said, hey, you made me sound like myself, but
Yes.
better. And that's what I want with chefs. Like I said, I've known Stephanie for years, but I told her the other day, I was like, I hope this doesn't sound weird, but I've been listening to podcast interviews you've done so that I hear your voice in my head when I'm writing
Wow.
to the book.
Very
or
method.
taking a text or an email she sent and turning it into a full head note or a conversation that we happen to be having. And I'm like, okay, I want this to sound like you, like the best version of you. And then it's a very separate thing when I'm working on my own things and my own pieces and my own recipes to make sure they sound like me.
Yes. The one thing I hate is like, I've been an M dash girl for decades.
Oh,
and
ever.
now everyone's going, oh, I'm taking your M dashes out of my captions because apparently AI uses them too much. And I don't want it to look like AI did this. I'm like, that's just how I write.
I feel like writers are refusing to give up the M dash because we all use M dashes way too much. It's so good. It's so good. And it's reflective of how people communicate now because of how quickly the world moves and how much we depend on texting and DMs, and that people aren't speaking in full, complete sentences as much anymore. And so an M dash is an excellent way to communicate that. But so I will not give up. You can tear them out of my cold, dead hands. But I do moderate my usage because you have to.
I guess so.
Yeah. So, but I think building on what you're saying there, I think the other piece of advice I would give anyone getting into food communication is to have a strong voice, because there can be a reliance on that sort of robotic recipe speak of not using any articles. And I know where that comes from. And so much of that comes from print media of only having so many lines on any given page and having to fit that recipe in there. But if you are in a digital world, take advantage of that and make your recipes and your head notes and your articles and your essays, make sure they have your voice, because otherwise it does sound like some dumb bot wrote it.
I love that. That's so great for not only food media, but I think any founder as well, when they're looking at their storytelling, is make sure it's you. Make sure it's not some dumb bot.
Sorry, bots.
Sorry, bots. I know. I always like say please and thank you because they're coming. Chandra, here we are. We're at the world's best and hardest question. So a little reminder for folks, this is called the perfect bite because it's a perfect bite of the value chain of folks across our food and beverage industry. But it's also because each of us have our own perfect bites. So a moment, a memory, something that you ate that you'll never forget and that will always make you smile. So Chandra, what is your perfect bite?
Well, I was prepared. I listen to the podcast. I'm a fan. I follow. So I was prepared for this question. And my perfect bite is, I would say, almost at least 50%, if not more so, about texture than it is flavor. And so I would say my perfect bite, like that I draw inspiration from, is a sandwich I had at my friend's restaurant at Sunday Dinner Club in Chicago. My friend Christine Sikowski and Josh Culp. Yes. And this was early days of Sunday Dinner Club. So I think this was back when it was still unofficially, not quite early, in Christine's apartment. Yes. They did a little slider on a very soft slider bun, kind of similar to like a Hawaiian roll in terms of texture. And it was a crispy fried shrimp and candied jalapeno mayo. And so you got this sandwich that you had this incredible bite that was a hot, crispy shrimp, battered, crunchy, just from the fryer, paired with a cold, sweet, spicy mayonnaise, and then this soft bun against the crunch of the breading on the shrimp and just pulling everything together. So it's sweet, it's spicy, it's savory, it's salty, it's soft, and it's crunchy, and it's kind of like everything together in one.
That's so perfect. And that candied jalapeno mayo, I know it well.
And so when they opened another location in a pickleball space, and they had the shrimp, and I was like, I will take a bun with that shrimp and I'm going to recreate that sandwich. But in thinking about our conversation this week, I made some schnitzel the other night because it's been really cold in Chicago, but I've been eating so many like stews and soups that I was like, I need something crunchy. I need something that's not braised. And so my husband and I made schnitzel the other night, and then I had some leftover and I heated it up, did like a quick round in the air fryer to like get it hot and crispy. And then I put it on a soft bun with some giardiniera mayo. And I was like, that's what I'm going to talk to Sarah about, the perfect bite. So
do you do the AO mayo? Is that the giardiniera you do?
No, it's Jardinese, which is a made in Chicago brand, but I haven't had the AO yet, but I'm going to try some of that because it looks good. It looks good.
It's a good one. Chandra, this was amazing. Thank you again so much for your time. Can
Thank
you let
you.
listeners know where they can find and follow you and support all your work here? So
Oh,
social
yeah.
accounts, the Substack name, and the upcoming projects.
On Instagram, it's Chandra's Plate. And on Substack, it's Another Bite with Chandra Ram. So you can search me or Another Bite and find it both ways. And, I've got more articles coming out that I'll be, linking to on Substack and on Instagram and Facebook. And here's hoping more books to come.
Yes. And people can still buy Indian Instant Pot cookbook, right?
They can still buy Indian Instant Pot, and then
Go
the
find
books
it.
I've co-authored, Korean barbecue and the Eiffel Tower cookbook and everything else. So
Fantastic. Thank you again so much. And everyone, thank you so much for listening in. This was Chandra Ram's Perfect Bite.
Thanks for tuning in to The Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media @PerfectBitePod. Now go get something good to eat.